Welcome to McMaster Minds, a podcast brought to you by McMaster University's undergraduate psychiatry program. This podcast will explore psychiatry training and the path to getting there through honest conversations with residents and staff. We hope this gives you a sense about the life of a psychiatry resident and staff psychiatrist, and that it helps you make the decision about whether psychiatry, and hopefully McMaster, is right for you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Faisal. I'm a medical student at McMaster, and I'm very excited to be joined today by Dr. Umair, the current PGY1 psychiatry resident at McMaster. Dr. Umair, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Faisal. I'm so excited to be here.
To start with, maybe you could introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yeah, I'm a PGY1 in psychiatry. Like you said, I'm at the McMaster Waterloo campus and I applied from out of province. So I applied from Manitoba and I am quite fresh with the CARMS process. So hopefully this can be somewhat helpful.
Absolutely. And did you always know you were interested in psychiatry?
No, I think psychiatry came a little later on to me. I really liked OB-GYN in the beginning, and I thought to practice women's health and the integration, you had to really do OB. But then when I went through my 6-week core, something just changed. It just felt right. It felt safe. It felt like, I really got along with the residents. And I learned that you could do a lot with psychiatry. You could do a lot of outpatient, a lot of inpatient. You could do geriatrics, child. I could still do women's health with perinatal, prenatal, and postpartum. So I think that was the turning point for me. And then I did electives after.
So in today's interview, we're going to dive straight into what applicants typically had on their CARMS applications when applying to psychiatry. In your case, did you pursue any particular degrees before medical school?
Yeah, I pursued undergrad in neuroscience and psychology. And then I didn't have a master's, and then I just ended up going to med school from there.
You mentioned that your background was related to psychiatry, both like neuroscience and psychology.
So I think that was definitely something that I had in mind, and I had a lot of neuroscience research and psych research. But again, I went into med school thinking OB, like I didn't really know enough about psychiatry. I wasn't really exposed to it. So it wasn't on my radar per se.
On that vein, then, let's talk a bit more about research. What kinds of research did you have on your application, if any?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of neuroscience research, given that my background was in neuroscience. I presented at the Canadian Neurological Sciences Federation or Foundation conference. And then I have a lot of other research that I'm genuinely passionate about. I have a lot of global health research. I have a research project related to women's health. So again, showing that I'm passionate, these projects, there wasn't a lot in quantity, but rather I want to say a few projects that I really care about and that I showed commitment to from start to finish.
In relation to that, some medical students wonder, um, is psychiatry specific related research necessary in your opinion?
Yeah, I don't think that's true. That's something I wondered in the beginning, but I think it's important to have projects that you're passionate about, that you care about, and that will reflect. Oftentimes, you can always connect them back to psychiatry just because it is so broad. It is nice to have projects that you care about rather than doing projects just for the sake of doing it. If you know early on that you like psychiatry, that's great. But if you end up having a project and something else that you really care about, it's often easy to find an intersection, in my opinion. But again, nice for you to do some psychiatry research to explore the field for yourself, to give you more avenues when you're in residency, and something that maybe you can even complete in residency. But I don't think it's necessary by any means.
Absolutely, that makes sense. At the same time, it sounds like research is something that was quite important to you personally.
Yeah, it was important to me. But I also know people that it wasn't as important to, and it really depends what you want to do and where you want to be. If you want to be in a more community psychiatry program, I think other things can really be highlighted on your application. And I think research, again, is important. It shows commitment, it shows that you are reliable, it shows a lot of amazing skills, but it isn't needed.
For some of our listeners who, might not have as much research yet, either, Is there anything else you would suggest to recommend to them?
Yeah, if they're applying to CARMS and they don't have as much research and this is something that they wanted later on, I recommend highlighting like again other extracurriculars that you really like or have been doing for a long time. I also just recommend maybe reaching out to different residents, other residents or like faculty to see if they have other projects that are just ongoing that maybe you can just kind of be like an additional member of. I know it kind of is contradicting because I might have said that it's nice to not do things just to do them, but if you are still at a phase where you can maybe jump onto a project, it will allow you to kind of get to know the colleagues that you might be wanting to work with, and it can provide other benefit.
Moving on to the next major section, electives, which are always a hot topic during CARM season. In your case, how did you plan your electives during clerkship?
Yeah, in my case, I really like psychiatry. Once I went through my 6 week core, I was really lucky to do that, and then I realized, this is it. But I just wanted to be extra sure that I didn't like something else more, and I was fully committed before CARMS. I'm an indecisive person, and I ended up scheduling a variety of electives. I actually only did one elective before CARMS in psychiatry, and it was a child and adolescent psychiatry elective. I don't recommend it. It's ideal to do more if you can. That was just more because I already knew I loved it. I just wanted to be sure I still didn't like OB or something else. And then I ended up doing a forensics elective after as well. And it worked out fine.
Did you end up doing any visiting psychiatry electives?
I didn't do any visiting psychiatry electives. I'm not entirely sure. I did apply for a few. I ended up canceling them. And that was just more so it's really important to do those visiting psychiatry electives, but I think I just hadn't planned that far in advance. If I was to go back, I probably would have like done them in retrospect in perhaps locations that I was actually hoping to go very strongly. Because there it is a lot of time and money that you do put in.
So it sounds like your elective experience, you had some electives in psychiatry and you also did do some non-psychiatry electives as well while you were exploring your other interests.
I think it's important before CARMS that you're sure because that's it. So there's two ways to go about it. If you know that's it, then you should definitely do psychiatry electives, and I recommend doing it in visiting electives. I recommend doing diverse electives to kind of see what you like. You could do a child elective, you could do a geri elective, and doing it with supervisors that maybe in the past students have worked with and have gotten reference letters from because they are aware of what a reference letter is like. I was lucky that on my rotation, I had heard really good things. I did some research. I had two supervisors I was working with on that rotation and was able to get reference letters from both. So it worked out for me for that reason. But I did a lot of asking around. So I think that was always good as well.
Moving on to the next section, our extracurricular activities. Um, did you yourself have involvement in things like student government, groups, advocacy, volunteer work, or leadership roles that you included in your application?
Yeah, I think I did quite a bit of extracurriculars, I would say. Again, topics that I was passionate about that were reflected over the years, like global health or women's health. I did. I hosted a conference. I went to Kenya for global health. And I think those themes became easy to talk about in my application. It was nice to have those themes rather than being all over the place. My application showed what I was passionate about because I had extracurriculars and research to back it up. And again, it wasn't psychiatry related. I wasn't on the psychiatry interest group, but rather I was on the OB interest group. So it was helpful to still be able to advocate for all the things I care about and showcase that no matter I might have changed my mind, but I still have all these projects to show that I can be reliable and committed.
And then just going into sort of a miscellanea category, were there any sort of unique aspects to your application that you think helped you stand out?
Yeah, I think again, some of like maybe my trip to Kenya would have helped me stand out. I think the project I developed, like a module on healthcare practitioners to practice trauma-informed care for South Asian women, but then not only just doing those big things, but also maybe developing a research project with those things or showing how I could lead a team and then presenting that research. So really a big highlighted project and showing how I can organize myself. I think some awards around that would have helped me as well. Those are like the big things that I can think of that probably would have stood out a little bit more. And then just also the fun things. Like I think I helped out with the psychiatry golf tournament when you're on your rotations being pretty open-minded, and that's how I ended up with that tournament.
I'm also curious about maybe the about me section of the CV, where people sometimes talk about things like yoga or their pets or other personal details.
Yeah, I put, I think, things like baking, and I put like classes that I enjoyed doing. And I think it's always nice to maybe mention it, and then maybe you could mention like a sentence on things that showcase how you've done it. Maybe if you like running, you could say the marathons you've run recently. It's always like giving them a little bit more because that's all they have. And I definitely encourage an about me section because that's all they have to kind of go about it. And sometimes they talk about it in interviews.
Makes sense, makes sense. And then when on the CARMS portal itself, there's the CV that you upload, but then there's also a place where you manually add in all of the details. Were there any discrepancies or differences between what you put on one versus the other?
I think they were honestly very similar at the end. I think I just went into more detail on my like resume, but they were very similar.
And then for just the other aspects of the application, any advice you have for getting strong reference letters?
Get as many as you can, and then you can always decide which ones you actually end up wanting to use. That's always nice. I think asking them if they're able to write a strong letter, wording it like that, because if they're not, they'll be honest at least. And also sometimes it's helpful if they have you haven't only worked with them for 2 weeks, I would have just send them my CV. And if you ask them early on, like on their core, always nice to just remind yourself and maybe even attaching a picture. Sometimes they really do just forget. And again, having more is always good because I remember just having to bug some of the people I asked for references very last minute, even though I had asked for extras.
For the personal letters, is there anything you'd suggest or recommend for doing those?
I think really starting early and really just like taking your time to kind of read through those letters and being able to edit it multiple times and maybe asking a close friend to edit, I think is always good.
And how long would you recommend spending on making and crafting your application?
I would recommend starting early in the summer and then continuing to work on it, especially the personal letters. The other things you can start later on, but I would definitely start the personal letters early.
And you mentioned friends as one. Are there other people who you can go to for advice during the process?
Asking other residents too is sometimes nice if they're not busy. Just being mindful that they're not involved in the actual program review, file review, and also just to get like close friends. And then, yeah, I think those two would be the big ones.
Yeah, awesome. Looking back on your own journey to residency now, is there anything you would have done differently when preparing your CARMS application?
Oh, definitely starting earlier. That would definitely be one of those things. I would have started earlier. I think it would have helped a lot. It would have been less stressful. And just after that, just relaxing and remembering like I stressed out quite a bit, but just letting CARMS do its thing.
And for students who are worried that they might not have the perfect CV, especially students who discover psychiatry later than most people, is there any advice you have for them?
I think it's important to know that like references count for a lot, personal letters count for a lot. You can always explain in interviews, why you ended up switching a little bit later. I think people don't expect you to want it for a very long, like it's not something that's people sometimes realize are very understanding and forgiving to you changing your mind. But once you change your mind, it's about how you react and how you can show that you would be a good resident.
And before we finish up today, is there any other final words of encouragement you have for students who are currently going through the process of putting together their CARMS applications for
Yeah, I
psychiatry?
would just recommend letting, again, like really reinforcing that letting carbs, it's a very stressful process. It's often a black box, but just knowing that it does work out, or really just trusting the process if you're unsure about where you want to go or if you can't rank it, not not over stressing yourself.
I really appreciate all the advice. Thank you so much, Dr. Amir, for your time. I'm really sure that this honest look at the CARMS process is going to be super helpful to all of our listeners.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.